Hi guys, yes. Right, now then, this page on the internet over on Tony Kuiper's website has started doing the rounds big time on the internet, talking about linear profiles. And it all started out with a blog post that he put up on the 23rd of July about him using linear profiles in Lightroom and Camera Raw. And it does make me smile because if I come over to Lightroom, let's just load up Lightroom, and I pull up one of Steve Kaluski's shots with his, oh God, what camera is it? EOS R5. This is the shot imported directly into Lightroom, and for donkey's years I've been preaching on about starting off with a process version swap like that, which is fundamentally a linearization of your raw file. In other words, what it's doing, it's getting rid of all Lightroom's jiggery-pokery that goes on in the background. And for those people who don't believe me, even if you go over onto Adobe's website and actually do some digging around, they will freely admit that you are not seeing your raw file when you open it up in Lightroom. You're seeing an interpretation of it in a manner with background adjustments that are hidden so you can't see them, to make them look more pleasing. And I don't know about you, but for proper image processing, you don't want to see a pleasing image to start off with, because fundamentally what's pleasing to some people is bloody awful to others. If you're wanting to process, you need to get to and see visually the actual data contained within the raw file, and that is why I do love using Raw Therapee, because it is one of the very, very few raw profile processors or raw file processors that actually shows you a completely neutral, linear camera profile representation of the shot that you are going to go ahead and process. So, just coming back over to Tony's website, you can come over here if you like. Just go to this address here. If I remember, I'll put a link to it in the description below. And it tells you fundamentally what he classes as a linear profile for Lightroom and Camera Raw, and basically how to use it. And he gives you a sort of really nice sort of wang bar here so you can see the differences. And then if you head off over to his linear profile repository, you can scroll down and you can go and you can download linear profiles. The only thing is, say we were wanting an EOS 800D profile. We've got to agree to terms and conditions, so we should have checked that box over there. So we'll go and check that box there. We'll come back down to the 800D, whatever that is, and then you'll see you'll go off to process and pay. Actually nothing, it is free, but when you actually go to free checkout, what he's doing is he's collecting data from you. He's collecting your name and your email address. Make that what you will. But really and truly, I'm just going to show you now a quick way of doing this yourself, all right, and creating these linear profiles, which is what you're getting here on your own for nothing. Yeah, even though these are for nothing, there's a lot of rigmarole and you are handing your data over. And if you also look here, we've got an EOS 1DS, an EOS 1DX, an EOS 1DX Mark II. We haven't got an EOS 1DX Mark III. So I think what we'll do is we will, before we head off back to Lightroom, what you'll need to do is to come over to this page over at Adobe, Camera Raw Digital Negative.html. And some people might advise you download this, but these SDKs are an absolute pain in the backside, and I'll just do my head in. What you really want is this old piece of software here, the DNG Profile Editor from way back in September 2012. And of course you can download a Mac OS version or a Windows OS version. I've actually got the Mac OS version, and it sort of doesn't install on your machine. You have to run it from the installer. So it's not a problem, but it's just a little bit fiddly. But what we'll do is we'll head off back over to Lightroom, and all I'll do is I will come back to the library module, and I will go to View, and I'll go to Show Filter Bar. And what I want to do, because Steve's actually sent me one or two files off a 1DX Mark III. So we'll go here, and basically we've got all these CR3 files off a 1DX Mark III, which Tony does not supply a linear profile for. So, I mean, fundamentally, this is the shot how it opens up in Lightroom, and what I've always taught you to do is just do a process version swap like that, and that makes the file go dull, flat, boring and horrible, but it actually decreases the level of noise. And you usually find that if you've got any slightly blown highlights in your original image, they are no longer blown and your shadows are quite a lot lighter. And then fundamentally all you do is a quick process on it, and Bob's your uncle. But this is a user preset, and I can never work out how to make user presets into a camera profile. So there you go. But I'm thick like that. I just process images. So what we can do is we can produce a linear camera profile to do pretty much the same thing, okay, which we would access from here, which is possibly a good thing. So the thing is, we can make this profile, this linear camera profile, very easily with that DNG profile editor, and that's what we're going to do. But what we'll actually need to do is to turn this raw file into a DNG. But strictly speaking, you don't really have to, because as long as it's just off this camera, you can use any shot. And so I don't want to convert this image to a DNG and not have the original raw file. So the way I do it, yeah, you could create a virtual copy and keep that as the raw file and then convert the original raw file into a DNG. But the way I do it is like this. And I just go to right click, show in Finder, and there's show in Finder, yes, and there is our highlighted raw file. I'm just going to right click on it and go copy, and then I'm just going to stay exactly where I am, and I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to go paste item. Alrighty, so now you can see I've got this copied CR3. That's handy, isn't it? Alrighty, so next thing I'm going to do is right click on the image, and I'm going to go to folder in library. Yep, and there is the folder highlighted, and I'm just going to go synchronize folder, and it says import new photos 2. Right, well I only need one of them, because I've done something else at a previous time. But if I go synchronize, and it's going to import that duplicate CR3, and there it is. I don't know why it came up with 2 in the first place. And this copy, I am now going to go to library, and I'm going to go to convert photo to DNG, and we'll go OK. So it's converting to a DNG, and then we'll right click and we'll go show in Finder. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close Lightroom, okay? And this is imperative. You must close Lightroom. Okay, just so as we can see what we're doing, I'll minimize Firefox. Alright, so this copy I'm actually just going to drag out and drop onto my desktop, just for ease of navigation. which you'll see in a moment. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this DNG profile editor, which we've just downloaded from the Adobe website. So we'll open it up, and because it's not actually installed, you'll see the profile editors come up on my desktop. I don't know how it works on a Windows machine. For all I know, on a Windows machine it'll probably install correctly. But anyway, so we'll just go open, and then what I want to do is to go to DNG profile editor, file, open DNG image, and I'm just going to navigate down to my desktop. Yep. And I'm just going to open that DNG file that we've just made. So we'll go open. And there we go. There is the file. Now if we come back over to the control panel for the DNG editor, you'll see we've got color tables, and then on a tab next to it, quite difficult to see because it's small, but we've got tone curve. All right. And the tone curve is currently set to the base profile, which is fundamentally the profile of the hidden adjustments in the background in Lightroom to make your image look supposedly more bloody pleasing, right? So what we want to do is come to this drop-down menu here, just click on it and go linear, and when I click linear, watch what happens to the image. There you go. And then all we need to do is to go to File and Export Canon EOS 1DX Mark III Profile. So there we go, and it will call it Untitled Recipe. So I'm just going to take the Untitled Recipe bit out. We need to keep the DCP bit in. So just backspace all that. Alrighty. And it's actually going to put it in the correct location, which is your Users, Library, Application Support, Adobe Camera Raw, Camera Profiles. That's nifty, isn't it? So we'll just go ahead and click Save. And what we've done is we've created this linear camera profile for a Canon 1DX Mark III. Alright, so we'll click OK, and then we might as well just go and shut the DNG editor. No, we don't need to save it because we've saved it already. And then if we come back and re-fire up Lightroom, then what it will do, it will actually record that addition that we've just made to the camera profiles. In other words, that linear profile for the Canon 1DX Mark III. And so all we're going to do is come back to our images, and we're just going to go to metadata, and we're going to go down to camera, and we're going to go to 1DX Mark III again, and there's that copy DNG. I mean, you can actually delete that now if you like, but here's our original RAW file as I processed it with my, go back over into the develop module, with my process version swap. All right, and you can see the process version swap in action and how to build it if we head off back over to the internet, and I go over to my YouTube channel, and you want this one, the missing zeroed preset process version swap update. All right, so go ahead and watch this if you want to do this linear profiling as a preset, or do it this the way I'm showing you now over in Lightroom with this profile created by the DNG profile editor. And because even though it's been made from a DNG, you can apply it to a RAW file, and it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And you can apply it to any RAW file off this 1DX Mark III camera. It doesn't really matter what ISO you've shot it at. It's just a process of identifying the crap that's put on your RAW file by your camera to create the preview JPEG on the back of the camera just after you've taken the shot, and the crap that Lightroom puts on it to make the image supposedly more pleasing when you first import it. So there you go, because it does the same thing to all RAW files of a particular camera. So where are we? I'm just going to go right click, settings, and I'm going to go to reset. So we're back to Adobe's supposedly pleasing background adjustments. And as you can see, by default, it's in Adobe Color. I'm just going to click on those 4 little squares there. And here's the camera profile that it uses by default. But if we scroll down, you can see under Profiles, if you have got a sideways pointing arrow there, just open it up. You can see we've got 2 in there. All right. So the one we've just made is this one. And you can see these little star tabs in the top. If one of these star tabs is highlighted, that means it's in your favourites, and they are the ones that show up in the drop-down menu normally. So I'm just going to make that a favourite, and then I'll go close. And so here are our favourites: Profile, Adobe Color, Switch Out, EOS 1DX Mark III, and bump, there you go. So now we've got a fundamentally linear profile for that camera. And what do we need to do to this? Not a lot, really. We might go and lift up the vibrance a bit. We might go and add a little bit of exposure. Yeah, bring down the highlights a little bit. Yeah, and then maybe add a little tiny tad of clarity. And then we can come down to the HSL panel. On luminance, let's just pick up a micro adjuster. We'll come in here and maybe lighten the grass up just a little bit, and then maybe lighten this area of the pheasant up a little bit. Yeah, and you can see fundamentally we're doing a very easy job of processing this image by adding a little bit more tonal contrast and a bit more colour contrast, which, let's face it, would be pretty hard to do if we were still back on the defaults of Adobe Lightroom, because fundamentally then we've got to realise that to do anything, we've got to take contrast out, and we've got to come to the tone curve and change the tone curve to get rid of what purports to be a linear tone curve, but isn't. It's a medium contrast tone curve. And so, you know, I mean, there we go. We're heading back to where we were before, but just putting a process version swap on it, or switching out to, let me just reset that again, and just go and switch out to this linear profile. And of course, we can just very easily go and redo those adjustments we made earlier, just by adding a little tiny bit of exposure, a bit of vibrance, a little bit of clarity, and then go back to luminance on the HSL, pull up the micro adjuster, maybe lighten up the greens a little bit, lighten up this area of the pheasant just a little tiny bit. Might even try and bring this background down, but that might affect the pheasant as well. I'm going to do a little bit more clarity on there, I think, a little bit more vibrance, and then come over to saturation perhaps on the HSL panel. Get another micro adjuster, and let's just saturate those greens a little bit. Yeah, that's looking a lot nicer. All right, maybe just add a little tiny bit more of exposure, not too much. And there we go. So there we are. And of course, this is a camera profile. Therefore, we can only apply it to shots done with this camera. So all you need to do is open up or fire up that Adobe DNG profile editor once for every camera that you ever own, all right, and just produce that linear profile. And so you'll be able to apply that linear profile to all your shots for all your different cameras. Alrighty, guys and gals, hope that's proved useful to you. Hope it's proved interesting. And yeah, until the next time, stay safe, stay well, keep taking the pictures, and I'll speak to you soon. Tooroo.